Okay, let me just bring up the Imrei Yaakov. My computer's a little slow this morning. Okay, there we go. So I'd like to review two Shas principles, two important Talmudic principles that are codified into law in this sif. One is Zachin la'adam shelo b'fanav, that as soon as I take possession of something on behalf of someone else, I'm considered as acquiring it for that person, so that it belongs to that person. In other words, a person can acquire something without it coming into his own personal possession if another human being acquires it on my behalf. And so that was the basis of this, the beginning part of this halacha, which basically stated that if Reuven gives something to Shimon and says, give this to Levi, then as soon as Shimon takes possession of it, it's considered to already be in Levi's possession. And therefore, even if Reuven wished to withdraw the gift, it's no longer his to withdraw, because once Shimon has taken possession of it, it's as if it already has met the mark of the recipient. Just like you can't take a gift back from someone that you've given a gift to because it now belongs to them, you can no longer take a gift back from the proxy that has acquired it on behalf of the recipient. Okay, now, if, however, a person guards his language when he gives the item to Shimon, and he says to him, I'd like you to transport this to Levi. So then it's clear from his language that he doesn't want Shimon to acquire it on behalf of Levi, and therefore, so long as Shimon has not put it into Levi's hands, Reuven can say, give me back the object, and he's perfectly within his rights, unless Levi is a poor person. Okay, now that's where we were up to, and we also further said that there's the aspect of, even though legally Reuven can withdraw a gift, but nonetheless there may be a chisaron amana, there may be a concept of acting in bad faith. If it's a small gift, then there was a sense of reliance that Levi was going to receive that gift. Okay, and so that's where we're up to in Sif Katan Chaf Tes, at the top, the top of the Imrei Yaakov on page Yed Beis. Sheyesh bazeh chisaron amana, kain kosav harama. So the Rama, in codifying this halacha, writes this in the Shulchan Aruch. Ulam ayin b'mayir mekomo shel harav shetamalze. I showed this to you briefly yesterday, that the margin notes which cite the sources of the Rav Shulchan Aruch questions this. De'im lo yada hala in kain ein bo chisaron amana. Because if Levi, the ultimate recipient, was unaware that this gift was coming to him, why would you say that there's a chisaron amana? Chisaron amana, as he says, shaharei lo shayach b'zeh smichus das, there was no sense of reliance if the recipient was unaware that he was going to receive the gift. And as we've clarified in a previous sif, in our discussions, certainly when the recipient is unaware that he's receiving a gift, there's no concept of chisaron amana. And according to some, even if he knows about it, but it was the pledge was not made in his presence that he's going to receive the gift, there's also no sense of real reliance. He'll say, I'll believe it when I see it, or, the person, I just heard the person wants to give it to me, but I don't know it for a fact. So therefore, this sort of is a problematic statement that there's an acting of in bad faith if the recipient is unaware. And so the conclusion that the Imrei Yaakov brings from other poskim is that we're talking about a scenario over here where Reuven made a declaration in Levi's presence, and he said to him, I'm going to give you a gift. And then he gives it to Shimon and says, do me a favor, when you see Levi, transport this to Levi. So Levi is aware of the gift, and he's also given it to Shimon to transport it to Levi. In that situation, but if Levi is totally unaware of the gift, and Reuven wishes to withdraw the gift before Shimon has acquired it on behalf of Levi, then it would be perfectly legitimate for Reuven to withdraw the gift, and there's no lack of ethics of chisar and amana in that situation, because Levi is not relying on any particular gift. He doesn't know about such a gift. Okay. Now, the last part of the halacha in the Sif pertains to another principle in halacha that's like a shas concept. It's an important concept called mitzvah lekayem divrei hames. It is a mitzvah to fulfill the wishes of the decedent. If I know that a person before he died wished for a particular asset of his and his estate to be given to a certain individual, so then even though there was no consummation of transaction that was made during his lifetime, there is a mitzvah for me, if it is within my power, to fulfill the wishes of the decedent. And this has many ramifications, which we're going to get into the next sif as well, regarding the children of a decedent or the executors of a decedent's estate, that even though legally there was no transaction affected, but there's at least an imperative to fulfill the wishes if I knew that this is what he wanted, the decedent. And we're going to try to get into this a little bit more in the present, this halacha and then the next halacha as well. And so the language of the Rav Shulchan Aruch is v'chol zman shelo chazar bo yesh l'shliach lasos shlichuso. That Shimon, who's the shaliach in this example that we give of Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, right? As long as Reuven has not withdrawn his gift, Shimon has a moral obligation to fulfill his proxyship. Afilu meis hamishaleach kodem sha'asa shlichuso. Even if Reuven passes away before Shimon had an opportunity to fulfill the delivery of the gift. Ve'ein hayorshim yecholim levatel hamatana miyad hashaliach mipnei shemitzvah lekayim divrei hameis kishemosor liyad acher b'chayav. And the heirs can't say, hey, don't take that envelope of cash to Shimon, to Levi rather. They say that to Shimon, and they say, our father Reuven has passed away. We now are the owners of his estate and anything that was in his estate. So therefore, you have no legal right to take what is now our money and give it to Levi. So they don't have the power to do that, even though they have a legitimate argument that the money does belong to them because it's part of their estate now. But the reason why they can't stop Shimon from delivering it to Levi is because since it was made clear that this was the decedent's wishes, they have a mitzvah to fulfill the wishes of the decedent. Now, there's a machlokas here as far as what the parameters of mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames. What are the parameters of this halacha? So first of all, we have to clarify that the parameters are purely having to do with the finances of the decedent. Mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames doesn't mean that if a guy before on his deathbed says, there's an amazing miniseries on Netflix, I'd like you to watch it, right? And then that's his last dying breath, right? And then, do I now have a moral obligation or a halachic obligation to fulfill the wishes of the decedent, because he wanted me to read a book or to watch something on Netflix? Now, so that's not what the halacha is. Now, if I want to, because he was a friend of mine and I want to fulfill his wishes, sure, Mela, that's a lovely thing to do. But here we're talking about a higher level of a sense of indebtedness to a dead man. We're talking about a halachic obligation. And so let's see we have to sort of quantify the parameters of mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames. So we'll get started on it today. And the Imrei Yaakov says in Sifkat and Lamed, afilu meisa mishaleach. Even if the decedent passed away and Shimon is just holding the money for safekeeping before he delivers it to Levi, Shimon still has a legal obligation to fulfill his proxyship. V'yesh omrim dedafka im nasno l'shaliach l'shem kach. And some say that there are parameters to this law, and it's only if Reuven explicitly gave it to Shimon and he said, listen, I want this gift to eventually reach Levi's hands. I want you to transport this to Levi. So technically, Levi has not been kona it. Levi has not acquired it because of the language that Reuven used when he gave it to Shimon. But some say that there's only a mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames when the transfer between Reuven and Shimon took place. It was clear that he wanted Shimon to give it as a gift to Levi. Avalim hayu biyado kodem v'lo nasno l'shem kach. But let's say Shimon was watching something that belonged to Reuven for safekeeping, and it was only after it was in his possession that Reuven said, Shimon, if anything happens to me, I'd like you to give this to Levi instead of giving it to my kids. Okay, that's like he says it like that. Oh, shebo liyado achar hatzava. Or let's say Reuven had made a will, and in his will he had expressed a desire that certain parts of his estate be given to different people, and he's already apportioned his estate accordingly. Then also, and then he gives a portion. He gives an asset of his to Shimon after he's made his tzava. Shimon is now no longer held by the obligation of mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames because it came into his hands after Reuven expressed his wishes. In other words, according to some people, the only time this halacha holds true that Shimon has a legal obligation to deliver it to Levi after Reuven's death is only when it came into his hands at the time of the instruction itself. So therefore, ein bozeh mishum mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames. Ve'im hifkid biyado b'toros pikadon she'im yitztarech yikachenu miyado. And if, for example, Reuven had given something to Shimon for safekeeping, so that and he said to him that if whenever I need it, I'm going to take it back from you. And he said to him, and if anything happens to me, give this object to Levi. That is not called that it was given to him for that express purpose. Since the main objective of giving it to Shimon was to keep it for Reuven for safekeeping, Reuven said, just in case I die, then you can give it to Levi. So he says there too, there's no mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames because it wasn't given primarily for the purpose of giving it to Levi. It was given primarily for the purpose of Shimon watching over it so that he can give it back to Reuven. Ulam yesh cholkim al kol zeh. Usvir luhu daf below hishlish mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames heicha shetziva b'fanav uchida l'kamen sif zayin ayin sham. But there's a totally other opinion that says that no, that it doesn't matter at what time Reuven made his desires known to Shimon, even if it was not at the time that he gave him the object, there is nonetheless a halachic obligation for Shimon to fulfill the wishes of Reuven should Reuven pass away, as long as he has the object in his possession. Now, again, there is a difference between the moral mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames and the halachic mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames. There's a moral, everyone agrees that there's a moral imperative that if you knew that a decedent wanted something done during his lifetime, after he passed away, involving his estate, then you should try to fulfill his wishes, right? But here we're talking about a halachic issue, because here the gift is being contested by the heirs. And that's the reason why you have all of these technical issues. Reuven gives a sizable amount of money to Shimon from his estate. And he tells Shimon, look, if, when I die, or I'd like you to give this to Levi, and then Reuven dies. So if Shimon has it in his possession, and it's clear that Reuven gave it to him expressly for the purpose of giving it to Levi, so then the heirs have no claim whatsoever. If Reuven simply gave the envelope of cash to Shimon and said, hold on to this, and when I need it, I'll ask it back from you. Oh, and by the way, if anything should happen to me, I want this money to go to Levi. So that's where there's some controversy as far as whether the heirs have a legal case against Shimon that, hey, that's our money, that's not your money to do with as you wish. I know that your father wanted this envelope to go to Levi if anything happened to him. The heirs can argue, according to the first opinion, they can argue that may very well be true, but legally that money is ours, and therefore, if we choose to not fulfill our father's wishes in that situation, at least we have a legal right not to, even though there may be a moral imperative for us to do so. So that's why all of this controversy comes up, how far the mechanism of mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames goes. Okay, so now we're up to Sifkat and Lamed Aleph. The Ein Hayarshin Yecholim Levatel, the heirs do not have, when Reuven gave it expressly to Shimon specifically for the purpose of giving it eventually to Levi, and Reuven dies, the heirs cannot nullify that gift. Va'afilu imes hamekabel mikol makom imisaso ha'isa achar misas hanosein tzarach litin liyorshe hamekabel. And he says that's true even if Reuven dies and then Levi dies, and Shimon's the only one left alive. So the heirs would argue, well, if Levi died, then you no longer have a mitzvah to fulfill our father's wishes. No, but the halacha is that if Levi was still alive at the time of Reuven's death, that's when Shimon's obligation of fulfilling the wishes of the decedent take place. And so therefore Shimon has to give that money to Levi's heirs instead of giving it to Reuven's heirs. That's the whole point of this halacha. The hamakabel zachabo b'chayav, the hayorshin yorshin oso acher kach. He says why? He says because the rights of Levi have been already enacted as soon as Reuven gave instructions to give it to Levi, and the heirs only have dibs or have a right to it after that association has been created. Aval im hamakabel meis kodem, yachar kach meis hanosein, yachzer liyorshe hanosein. But if the situation was reversed, let's say Reuven gave the money to Shimon and said to give it to Levi, and then Levi first dies, and then Reuven dies. So then the heirs have a right to demand that the money be given back to them, because their argument is, our father wanted that money to go to Levi. Levi passed away. Once Levi passed away, that desire was now nullified, and therefore, now that our father has died, you have an obligation to give that back to the estate which belongs to us. V'leka bazeh mishum mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames, debishah shemes nispatlu devarav sharei tziva litno lahamakabel atzmo, uv'shah shemes lo haya makabel chai. And the reason why Shimon no longer has an obligation to fulfill his proxyship is that as soon as the recipient dies, as soon as Levi dies, that proxyship was now null and void before Reuven himself passed away. And therefore, since by the time Reuven died, that proxyship was already nullified, then it goes back to the estate automatically. Okay, that sounds to be pretty intuitive. So let's go on to the next halacha. Lamed Beis, shemitzvah l'kayim divrei hames, that it is a mitzvah to fulfill the wishes of the decedent. So the Imrei Yaakov says, V'zeh amor dafka b'nechasav v'yirushasav. He says, and this halacha of a mitzvah to fulfill the wishes of the decedent is only in a case of a person's property and his heirs. That the heirs of a person's property have an obligation if they know that the wishes of our father or the testator was that it should go to a certain party. We have a mitzvah to fulfill that wish. And as we learned in Sifkat and Lamed, according to some, it's only when it came into the hands of the executor, like Shimon, this proxy, if it only came into his hands at the time when those wishes were expressed. But if the wishes were expressed either before or after it came into Shimon's hands, according to some, Shimon is no longer legally bound by mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames. Aval b'sha'ar mili lo amrinan de mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames afilu b'tzava. He says, but when it comes to other matters that are not pertaining to the estate of the decedent, but rather pertaining to something that I happen to know was the desire of the decedent, then we don't say this halacha of mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames. Even if a person wrote it expressly in his will, I'd like you to, a parent could write anything in a will, right? As far as his dying wishes, he wants his children to live in a certain neighborhood. He wants his children to take care of a particular cousin, be nice to him, or make sure that he is provided for. And there could be a number of different wishes. But if he's asking them to do something that does not involve the assets of his own personal estate that he's leaving for his children, so then there's no longer this halach of mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames. Ella demikol makom mitzad lifnim mishuras adin ro'i l'kayim af b'shar mili. He says, but when it comes to beyond the halachic requirement, there still is a lifnim mishuras adin, going beyond the letter of the law, but doing an act of piety doing a chesed for the decedent. So then there's a mitzvah even when it doesn't involve the assets of the decedent. V'yesh omrim de b'tzavos av va'em af b'sha'ar mili. He says, but some say when it comes to a parent's last testament, then this halach of mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames does extend beyond how one should use the assets of the estate. O ba'ofen delesbo mishum mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames mikol makom tzarech l'kayim hatzava midin kibbut ava'im va'ayin l'kamen sivzayin divrei maschal ad sheyitzaveh. And what's the reason for that? Because when it comes to a parent, if you know your parent's wish was for you to do something, then even without this halacha of mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames, that there's a special requirement that since the decedent is no longer here, you have an obligation to try to fulfill what he would have done himself had he still been alive. There's an additional aspect, which is the mitzvah of kibbut av va'em. Now remember, the mitzvah of kibbut av va'em also has limitations. The mitzvah of kibbut av va'em basically says that if you know your parent wishes something, so then you should try your best to fulfill that wish for a parent. But it has limitations. So for example, if a parent says, I want you to take some of your assets and give it to so and so, then I don't have an obligation to expend my own money just because my parent wishes for me to do so. So there are clear limitations to the mitzvah of mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames, and as we'll see, we'll get into this more in the next sif when we do the follow-up of this halacha. Let's take a look at just take a look at right, when it comes to other matters, there is no mitzvah to fulfill the wishes of the decedent. That if you take a look at footnote number Pei Hey, he quotes the Shvus Yaakov, which is one of the achronim of the responsa, quoted in the Pischei Tshuva, and he says, I refer you to the Pischei Tshuva, Shehebi Gam Raya Medivrei Yaakov, Shehutzrach lahashbiya es Yosef unesasani mimitzrayim. He says, what is our proof that the mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames is limited in its scope of as far as being halachically binding? He says, when Yaakov wanted Yosef to bury him in Eretz Yisrael, right? So he made Yosef take a shvuah during his lifetime. Why was it necessary for Yosef to take a shvuah? Why didn't Yaakov just say, listen, my last wish and desire is that you bury me in Egypt. Do we have a deal? And why would Yosef have to take a shvuah? V'lo hayasagi b'tzava. Apparently you see that Yosef could have absolved himself from burying his father in Eretz Yisrael, because mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames only extends to matters pertaining to the estate of Yaakov. Yaakov's remains, as far as where he wanted to be buried, is not subsumed under his estate. Yeah, is no issue of the estate of Yaakov. So what you see from that whole exchange between Yaakov and Yosef was that Yaakov would only be able to bind Yosef to this and make sure that Yosef would bury him in Eretz Yisrael, as if he heard Yosef swear. But if Yosef had not taken an oath, if Yosef would have just been silent, and Yaakov would have said to him, I want to be buried in Eretz Yisrael, Yosef could have halachically absolved himself by saying that there's no mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames if it doesn't pertain to my father's estate. V'chein mimasha amru lo echav avicha tziva lifnei moso ana sana pesha achecha demashma shezeh rak bakasha v'lo shayach l'chayva al zeh ayin sham. And furthermore, if you notice the way the brothers spoke to Yosef after Yaakov died, they presented the plea of their father of, I want you to take care of your brothers, and I want you to forgive your brothers. So the way that the brothers had presented it to Yosef is that it was a request, not a command that Yosef was legally bound to. And so you see from all of these examples, and maybe we'll take a look at a little bit more tomorrow, that you see from these examples in the Chumash that Yosef was not legally bound based on the principle of mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames to either bury his father in Eretz Yisrael or to forgive his brothers and to take care of them after their father died, because these were matters that were outside the purview of Yaakov's personal estate. And so, yes, there may be a moral issue, there may be a desire to fulfill kibbut av va'em, but there's no aspect of mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames based on those things. Okay, let's take a look at the Likutim. Shemitzvah l'kayim divrei hames. Kasav harama, kol davar shenikna b'matna shchiv meira, im kadmu hayarshim umachru umachru hamakabel yachol lahotzio min halokeach, the divrei shchiv meira kiksuvim l'chumesurim dami babi kinyan gomer. So there's a principle, what's called the matna shchiv meira, which is the halacha basically says that if a person states something verbally on his deathbed, that I want a particular asset of mine to go to Ploni, even though normally you need a transaction, a kinyan, to finalize that gift, but if the person's literally on his deathbed, then his verbal statement constitutes a kinyan. That's a rabbinic law. And so in that situation, if the heirs try to undo it, they don't have the ability to undo that. So that even to the point where if they sold that asset that the testator said was going to Ploni, the Ploni can take them to court and take it from them. Aval davar shelo nitan b'matana rak mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames, im kadmu hayorshim umachru masha asu asu. However, in a situation where all we know is that there's the wish of the decedent that a certain part of his asset should go to Ploni, and let's say to go to Levi, and Ruvain dies, so then in that situation, b'di'eved, if the heirs ended up selling that asset instead of giving it to Levi, Levi does not have legal recourse against them. In other words, b'di'evet, he cannot sue them. It's only a lechatchila that they have an obligation to fulfill the wish, but b'di'evet, Levi has no power of litigation in a court of law. And I'd like to continue this tomorrow. Any questions, comments before we call it a day? As we'll see, there's going to be lots of issues, that real life issues that come up when it pertains to this halacha of mitzvah l'kayim divrei hameis, the mitzvah to fulfill the wishes of the decedent. Anyone? Okay.
Have a great day.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Rabbi.
Take care, gentlemen. Be well, everyone.